Hello, welcome. In my last video on past and being past, I shared on some attitude that you should develop when you're being passed by others. I said when you're being passed by others, you should understand that probably they know something you don't know. They're doing something you're not doing. You might not be in the same season with the person, and you might not even be going to the same destination. And so I also encourage us that when you're being passed by others, let them go. And if it is possible, encourage them to move ahead, to move forward. And so today I want to share with you briefly on some keys or some attitudes you should develop when you pass others, because somehow in life, if you have not passed others, you're going to pass others. You're going to go ahead of others. You're going to go ahead of your siblings. You're going to go ahead of your colleagues. You're going to go ahead of your peers. Or there are certain attitudes, there are certain mindsets or responses that you must develop when you pass others. We have this attitude whenever we are driving and we pass someone. We have this tendency of thinking that we are better drivers or we have better cars, and in life we really love, it's a human thing that you love to share how you went to that organization and you went ahead of everybody. It's not a wrong thing, but there are certain attitude that we should develop when we pass others. And the first attitude that we should develop when we pass others is that we should understand that passing others doesn't mean we are operating at our peak or we are operating at the maximum of our potentials. Most often we pass people and we look around and we say, I've gone ahead of Tom, I've gone ahead of Peter, I've gone ahead of Susan, and we think that we have arrived, we think that we are operating at our maximum. No. You might have gone ahead of people, but you are not operating at your maximum potential. You are not operating at your peak. So you have to still keep working on yourself, still keep developing yourself, still keep fine-tuning your gifts, your talent, your skills in order to get to that version that God wants you to operate. The second thing you should understand and the attitude you should develop is that when you pass others, you should understand that passing others doesn't mean that you are the best. Because sometimes life will just place you in a situation where you will pass others because of certain favors and because of certain privileges. It doesn't mean that you are the best. It doesn't mean that you are the best candidate. It doesn't mean that you are the best person. It might just mean that you're just being favored. You're just being favored by people, by life, by God. So don't look down on others because you have gone ahead of them. You might not be the best. We have been in situations where if you look around, you will find that people who are more qualified than you are under you. You might find, if you look in life, you will find a situation that you are not the best person, but you have gone ahead. People favored you. People helped you. Going ahead of others does not necessarily mean that you are the best. If you look critically, you find that when going to school, you find people who are more intelligent than you. People are more smarter than you, but you have gone ahead of them. So going ahead does not necessarily mean that you are the best or you are the smartest. The third thing you should understand is that when you pass others, it doesn't necessarily mean you arrive before them. There are situations where you pass a driver on the road, then he suddenly comes and passes you. And that's how life is. Sometimes you go ahead of people in a certain area, then they come and go ahead of you. You go ahead of them, then from nowhere you see they go ahead of you. So when you go ahead of people, the attitude you should develop is the attitude of humility. You should understand that passing people does not mean that you arrive first. Especially sometimes even when we pass people or we are promoted by life, we are promoted to a certain level, we stop working on ourselves because we look around. I've gone ahead of Paul, I've gone ahead of Peter, I've gone ahead of John. So we don't work on ourselves anymore. So passing people doesn't mean that we will arrive before them. They must come from behind and go ahead of us. So when you pass people, develop the attitude of humility and still keep working on yourself. The fourth thing you should understand is that passing people is a responsibility that life or God has given you. Sometimes you go ahead of your siblings, you go ahead of your peers, you go ahead of your older colleagues, your older friends, your older peers. That is a responsibility. That is a responsibility. See it as a responsibility. It may be life has allowed you to go ahead so that you could in turn help them. You could in turn help the community, help your family, help your brothers, help your peers. Don't look at it as something that you should start looking down on them. It could be a responsibility that life has given you. You remember Joseph, who had this great dream that all of his brothers, they came and they bowed down to him, and he shared the dream with them, and they were angry. They sold him. He went to Egypt, and when finally they came and they bowed to him, and they were repenting and they were crying and they were weeping, he said, "No, you didn't sell me. God sent me ahead to preserve and to save lives." He was one of the youngest, but God sent him ahead to preserve and to save lives. So sometimes you go ahead of others to go preserve, to go save them. You're going ahead of them to go prepare a place for them, like Christ says. You're going ahead of them because you're going to help them. You're going ahead of them because God or life sent you ahead so that you could in turn help them. So don't see you're going ahead of them as something that you should look down on them, something that you should despise them, something that you should disrespect them. No. Going ahead is to preserve lives, is to save lives, is to help them. And finally, never try to go ahead of people in life. Never try to go ahead of people. What do I mean? Walk on your own pace. Walk on your own pace. If life places you ahead of people, that's great. But never put in your mind that I want to work hard so that I'll go ahead of my friends, my mates, my colleagues. No. Work on yourself. Give your best in whatever you are doing because you want to go ahead of yourself. You want to arrive, you want to fulfill your God-given dreams. So these are some of the keys or attitude that we should develop when we pass on. I hope you pick up something from this presentation that will help you when next life places you ahead of someone. God bless you. Bye-bye.